The chamber hummed with the low thrum of holographic displays, each flickering like distant stars against the vast dome of the Galactic Concorde's assembly hall. Ambassador Elara Voss stood at the podium, her fingers tracing the edge of the voting tablet, its surface cool and unyielding under her touch. She was Earth's voice here, tall, with the sharp angles of a woman who'd spent too many years in low-grav stations, her dark hair pulled back in a practical braid. Beside her, in the shadowed alcove reserved for human aides, sat Marcus Hale, her chief engineer, fiddling with a small diagnostic tool. He was stocky, his face etched with the perpetual squint of someone who'd stared down too many failing reactors, and he muttered under his breath about the inefficiency of alien tech. Elara glanced at the tiered seats rising around them, filled with representatives from 100 worlds. The Krell from Vexa Prime loomed like iridescent boulders, their multifaceted eyes reflecting the light in prismatic shards. Beside them, the ethereal forms of the Lirani shimmered, their gaseous bodies coiling in subtle agitation. The vote was moments away. Earth's proposal to share fusion core blueprints, a bid for alliance against the encroaching void storms that ravaged the outer rims. It wasn't charity, it was survival. Humanity's grit had tamed those storms on their own fringe worlds, and now they offered the key. "They're stalling," Marcus whispered, leaning close enough that Elara caught the faint scent of engine grease on his jumpsuit. His voice carried the dry edge of caution, honed from years pulling miracles from scrap in the Sol shipyards. "Look at the Valori delegate, tentacles twitching like he's got a short circuit." Elara nodded subtly, her expression a mask of composed resolve. She'd learned early that aliens read human faces like open data streams. Show doubt, and the deal crumbled. "Patience, Marcus. We've got the data to back it. If they vote no, it's their funeral when the storms hit their trade lanes." The central orb pulsed, and the Concorde's AI intoned in its neutral cascade of languages. The vote commences. Earth's Proposition 47, open-source fusion stabilization for all signatories. Elara held her breath as the holograms tallied. Green lights bloomed across the dome. Vexa yes, Lirani abstain, a scattering of independents in favor. Then the Thalary's red slashed through, followed by a cascade. Whispers rippled like wind through the hall. When the final count flashed, nay by a slim margin, Elara's shoulders tightened, but she kept her chin high. "Denied," the AI declared. "Earth's proposal fails." Marcus swore softly, pocketing his tool. "Idiots. They'll regret that when their hulls start cracking." As the session dissolved into murmurs, Elara gathered her notes, the weight of silence settling heavier than the dome's recycled air. Earth's isolation wasn't new, but this vote felt like a fracture, a warning etched in the void. She met Marcus's eyes, seeing the same flicker of determination there. Back on the shuttle, they'd regroup. Humanity didn't fold, they adapted. The shuttle's engines whined to life as they detached from the station, Earth's blue marble shrinking in the viewport. Elara strapped in, her mind already racing through contingencies. "Contact the team on Luna Base. We need to lock down the course, no sharing now." Marcus nodded, his fingers flying over the console. "Already on it." "But, Ambassador, what if this silence spreads? The Concorde's got ears everywhere." She watched the stars streak by, the first twinge of unease coiling in her gut. The void storms were coming, and Earth's ingenuity might be their only shield. Little did they know the real storm was just beginning. Captain Elara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the Odyssey's engines a steady vibration through the deck plates. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, but the air felt thicker now, laced with the unspoken weight of the Council's decision. Earth's silence had stretched from hours to a full day, no response to the hail from the Galactic Concorde's envoy ship trailing them like a shadow. "Still nothing from home," murmured Lieutenant Kai Rin, his fingers dancing over the comms panel. Kai was the steady one, his calm voice a counterpoint to the storm brewing in Elara's gut. He glanced up, dark eyes reflecting the glow of the screens. The envoy's pinging again. "They're demanding we turn back." Elara's jaw tightened. She was the brave sort, the kind who charged into asteroid fields without a second thought, but this felt different, personal. Earth had voted to withhold their terraforming tech from the Concorde, a bold stand against the alien coalition's expansionist hunger. Now the silence screamed isolation. Ignore them. Plot a course for the outer rim. We need to reach the survey site before they lock us out. The bridge doors hissed open, and Dr. Mira Solis strode in, her lab coat fluttering like a flag of defiance. Mira was the cautious heart of the team, always double-checking readings, but her wit sharpened under pressure. "Captain, if we're pushing forward, we need to talk about the anomaly. The probe data from Epsilon Eridani shows gravitational spikes that could shred the hull. And without Earth's support, we're flying blind." Ilara nodded, rising to join her at the tactical display. The hologram flickered to life, a swirling vortex of distorted space mocking their resolve. The external challenge loomed. A rogue singularity, a relic from some ancient war, blocking the only viable path to unclaimed resources. Losing access meant Earth's fledgling colony project starved, colonies left to wither under hostile suns. Before Ilara could respond, alarms blared. Kai spun in his chair. Envoy ships launching drones, interceptors. They're forcing a standoff. Adrenaline surged. Ilara's hand flew to the intercom. All hands, battle stations. Kai, evasive maneuvers. Mira, get me options on that singularity, anything to slip past these pests. The ship lurched as the first drone volley skimmed their shields, sparks dancing across the view screen. Myra's brow furrowed, her mind racing through equations. We could slingshot around the event horizon, use its gravity to accelerate. Risky, but it might buy us distance. Ilara met her gaze, the decision hanging heavy. Do it. Earth didn't raise quitters. The Odyssey banked hard, engines roaring in protest, diving toward the anomaly like a spear into the void. As they hurtled closer, the stars warped into streaks, the pull tugging at the ship's frame with invisible fingers. Kai's voice cut through the tension. Holding course, but the envoy's matching us. They're not backing off. In the dim light of the bridge, Ilara felt the first crack in their plan. The singularity's influence was stronger than anticipated, pulling debris into a deadly ring that battered their forward arrays. A console sparked, and a junior ensign yelped, nursing singed fingers. The cost was immediate, tangible. One failed shield generator, and they were vulnerable. Mira leaned over her tablet, muttering calculations. Adjust thrusters 5 degrees starboard, now. Her call snapped the crew into action, the ship twisting just enough to avoid a tumbling asteroid fragment. But the maneuver drained power reserves, lights flickering as they skimmed the gravitational shear. From the comms, the envoy's voice crackled through, synthetic and cold. Human vessel, stand down. The Concorde revokes your survey rights. Return or face impoundment. Ilara slammed the mute button. Not today. She turned to her team, the camaraderie forged in 100 simulations now tested in fire. Kai flashed a grim smile, wiping sweat from his brow. Mira nodded, her caution yielding to grit. The anomaly loomed larger, a black maw promising escape or oblivion. As the drones closed in, firing warning shots that lit the darkness, Ilara realized the silence from Earth wasn't just absence. It was a gauntlet thrown, daring them to prove humanity's worth alone. The Odyssey plunged deeper, the hull groaning, stakes rising with every heartbeat. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the Odyssey's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with starlight, but the real tension coiled in the bridge air, thick, unspoken. Beside her, Engineer Raj Patel wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers dancing over a diagnostic panel. The comms array is holding barely, he muttered, voice steady despite the strain. But if that pulse hits again, we're blind. Across from them, Lieutenant Mira Kane leaned against the tactical console, her sharp eyes scanning readouts. She was the cautious one, always calculating odds, and right now her jaw tightened as she traced the anomaly on her screen. It's not random, Cap. That silence from the council, it's masking something. Sensors picking up gravitic distortions like a fleet cloaking in the void. Ilara nodded, her mind racing back to the vote. Earth's delegation had walked out, refusing to endorse the Xenocide Pact against the rogue AI swarm. The galaxy's silence had followed, a void where alliances once buzzed. Now out here on the fringe it felt like a trap snapping shut. Options? She asked, keeping her tone even, adventurous grit masking the knot in her gut. Raj straightened, his witty edge cutting through. We could jury-rig the auxiliary thrusters for a microjump by time. But it'll burn fuel we can't spare, leaving us stranded if things go south. He glanced at Mira, who shook her head. Too risky, she countered, arguing as always under pressure. Better to deploy the probe swarm, map the distortion. If it's a rival fleet, we need eyes before we blink. The ship shuddered then, a low groan echoing from the hull. Alarms blared, another pulse, weaker but insistent like fingers probing for weakness. All hands brace. Raj, get that rig started. Mira launched the probes. As the engineer bolted for the access hatch, tools clanging in his belt, Ilara watched the view screen. The stars blurred, and in that fleeting distortion she swore she saw shadows, sleek alien silhouettes uncoiling from the dark. The Odyssey's lights dimmed, power diverting to defenses, casting long shadows across the bridge. This wasn't just a vote's echo, it was a hunt, and Earth's silence had painted a target on their backs. Myra's probes streaked out, tiny sparks against the abyss, feeding data in bursts. First readings confirm it, she said, voice tight. Not one ship, a formation. They're herding us toward the nebula. Ilara's resolve hardened, the weight of command settling like an old friend. No speeches, just action. Helm, evasive pattern delta. Let's see if human grit outflies their shadows. The ship lurched, engines roaring to life as the first probe's feed crackled. A glimpse of iridescent hulls, silent predators closing in. The cost was already mounting, fuel, time, the fragile hope of warning Earth, but turning back wasn't in their blood. Elena gripped the console edge as the shuttle shuddered through the debris field, the stars beyond fracturing into jagged lines of light. The silence from Earth had stretched into its third cycle now, no hails, no data bursts, just the void where the beacon should pulse. Jax hunched over the auxiliary panel, his fingers dancing across the flickering holograph, sweat beading on his brow despite the chill in the cabin. Still nothing, he muttered, voice tight. The relays fried or jammed. Could be solar flares, but those don't whisper like this. He glanced at her, eyes sharp behind the glare of the screen. We push closer, Cap, and we're blind in the soup. She nodded, jaw set, the weight of command pressing like the G-forces from their last burn. Brave didn't mean reckless, but turning back now felt like surrender. The Council's vote echoed in her mind, Earth's lone dissent against the quarantine edict, branding humanity as the unpredictable variable. And then, the blackout. Not a cutoff, a hush, deliberate and deep, like a predator holding its breath. Mark the vector, Elena said, her tone steady, masking the knot in her gut. We're threading the needle. If it's interference, we map it. If it's them? She let the words hang, the them, encompassing the fleet of silent enforcers rumored to circle Sol's edge. The shuttle lurched as a chunk of wreckage, twisted alloy from some forgotten probe, grazed the hull. Alarms blared, short and shrill, then Jax silenced them with a slap. Shields at 60%. That was too close. Remember the Sims? One bad hit and we're space confetti. She shot him a wry smile, the kind that said they were in it together. Then don't let it happen was. Reroute power to forward deflectors. He complied, grumbling under his breath about heroics and overtime pay, but his hands moved with the precision of someone who jury-rigged half the fleet's engines in his sleep. The debris field thickened ahead, a graveyard of satellites and hull scraps orbiting like ghosts. Elena's mind raced. The vote had been Earth's stand for autonomy, refusing to hand over the fusion tech that could tip galactic balances. Now this silence screamed retaliation. A proximity ping cut through the hum, something large drifting just off their path. Not debris. Elena leaned in, enhancing the scan. That's no rock. Structure integrity at 98%. It's intact. Jax's face paled. Council probe? Or one of ours? Neither. She punched in a tight evasion curve, the shuttle groaning as thrusters fired. But the object accelerated, matching their drift with eerie grace. No emissions, no IFF signal, just motion, purposeful. Hostile. Jax asked, already priming the pulse cannon. Not yet. Elena's pulse thrummed, but she kept her voice level. Hail it. Wide band. The comm crackled open, broadcasting into the black. This is UNS Shuttle Epsilon 7. Identify yourselves. Silence answered, thicker than before. The object closed, its silhouette resolving into a sleek, angular form, Krellian design, the Enforcer's silent watchers. Jack swore softly. They're jamming us. Full spectrum. We can't even ping Earth from here. The shuttle banked hard as the Krellian vessel loosed a warning shot, a plasma arc sizzling past the viewport. Elena yanked the yoke, weaving through a cluster of spinning wreckage. Shards pinged off the hull like hail. Evasive pattern Delta. Give me options, Jax, not prayers. He patched in auxiliary sensors, bypassing the jam with a makeshift frequency hop. Got a window, narrow, but it'll link us to the outer buoy. But it'll take diverting everything, weapons, life support dips to minimal. Do it. The decision burned, a real cost in the freezing air that followed. Elena's breath fogged the controls as the Krellian closed again, its shadow eclipsing the stars. She fired a burst from the cannon, scoring the pursuer's flank but not slowing it. The chase tightened, debris exploding around them in silent blooms. As the link flickered to life, a fragmented message clawed through. Embargo enforced, vessels detained. Earth isolated. Elena's heart sank. Not just silence, a blockade turning their warning into a cage. The shuttle spun free of the field, the Krellian trailing like a specter. Jack slumped back, grinning fiercely despite the blue lips. Link's holding Cap barely. What's the play? She straightened, eyes on the unfolding void. We punch through. Find a gap, signal the colonies. Earth's not done talking yet. The words carried the grit of their kind, humans stubborn in the face of the galaxy's cold shoulder. But as the engines whined toward Redline, Elena wondered if the silence would claim them first. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair, the hum of the shuttle's engines vibrating through her bones like a distant earthquake. The viewport framed the swirling nebulae of the outer rim, but her eyes were fixed on the holographic display flickering before her, schematics of the derelict station orbiting the gas giant below. Status on the docking clamps? She asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Lieutenant Kai Ren, ever the cautious one, tapped furiously at his console. His fingers, calloused from years of jury-rigging repairs on frontier outposts, danced across the keys. Clamps engaged, but the seals are corroding. We've got maybe 20 minutes before atmosphere leaks. He glanced up, his dark eyes narrowing. This place was abandoned for a reason, Cap. The Council's vote sealed it off, said the silence from Earth echoed too much here. Ilara nodded, unbuckling her harness. She was the brave sort, the one who charged into voids where others hesitated, but even she felt the weight of that vote. Earth's delegation had pushed for reclamation, arguing human grit could turn ghost stations into lifelines, only for the alien majority to silence them. Now, with comms blacked out and their supply ship adrift, this derelict was their only shot at resupply. Zara, you're with me. Kai, monitor from here. If it goes south, you pull us out, no heroics. Zara, the wiry xenobiologist with a wit sharper than her scalpel, slung her toolkit over her shoulder. Her scales shimmered faintly under the cabin lights, a remnant of her aquatic homeworld, but her grin was all human mischief, picked up from too many joint missions. Heroics? From you? Never. But if we find those fabled Earth relics the Council buried, I call dibs on the coffee synthesizer. The airlock hissed open, spilling them into the station's dim corridors. Gravity was spotty, pulling them in fits as they magnet boots clomped along graded floors. Ilara swept her flashlight beam across walls etched with faded galactic standard script, warnings about containment breaches, dates syncing with the vote that had isolated this sector. A low groan echoed from the vents, like the station settling into its grave. They reached the central hub, a cavernous chamber where emergency lights pulsed weakly. Consoles sparked intermittently, and in the center, a massive cryopod loomed, its glass fogged over. Zara approached first, her scanner beeping. Life signs. Faint but there. Human, I'd bet my fins on it. Ilara's pulse quickened. The challenge wasn't just the failing station, it was what the Council had hidden. Rumors whispered of test subjects, humans pushed to their limits in experiments that mirrored Earth's own defiant innovations. She wiped frost from the pod's viewer, revealing a face, pale, frozen in time, eyes closed in what looked like mid-scream. Wake protocol, she murmured, initiating the sequence. The pod whirred to life, alarms blaring as fluids drained. The figure inside stirred, coughing violently as the lid unsealed. He was older, gaunt, with the insignia of a pre-vote engineer on his jumpsuit. "Who?" he rasped, eyes wild. "Elara Voss, Earth Recon. We're here to get you out." She helped him sit up, steadying him as Zero-G tugged at them all. He clutched her arm, voice a gravel whisper. "The silence, it started here. They voted to bury us because we proved them wrong. The drive, human design, it works. But it calls things from the void." Zara's scanner went haywire, readings spiking as the station shuddered. Lights flickered out, plunging them into strobing darkness. Kai's voice crackled over comms. "Incoming anomaly. Pull back, now." Elara hauled the engineer toward the exit, Zara covering their rear. The groan from the vents turned to a roar, shadows lengthening unnaturally in the beam of their lights. Whatever the council had silenced, it wasn't staying buried. As they sprinted, the engineer's warning hung in the air. The vote hadn't ended the threat, it had only delayed it. And now, with their shuttle vulnerable, the cost of Earth's grit was about to hit home. Captain Elara Voss gripped the console edge as the Aurora's hull groaned under another plasma burst. The bridge lights flickered, casting jagged shadows across her crew's faces. Harlan, her engineer, wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers dancing over the auxiliary controls. "Shields at 30% cap. That Krell frigate's not playing nice, they're herding us toward the nebula." She nodded, eyes locked on the viewscreen where the swirling purple clouds loomed like a cosmic trap. The council vote had been a disaster. Earth's plea for aid against the encroaching void storms dismissed as human exaggeration. Now, cut off from galactic support, they were alone in the fringes, scavenging for the rare isotopes needed to stabilize their warp core. One wrong move, and the nebula's radiation would fry their systems, or worse, mutate the crew from the inside out. "Options?" Elara asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. She was the brave one, always charging ahead, but doubt gnawed at her today. Losing the Aurora meant no way home, no proof that humanity's warnings weren't bluffing. Mira, the xenobiologist, leaned over her scanner, her cautious nature showing in the way she double-checked every reading. The nebula's edge has pockets of calm, eddies where the isotopes cluster. But entering means dropping shields to scan properly. Risky as hell. Harlan snorted, his wit a shield against fear. Risky? That's understatement of the year. Last ship that tried sprouted tentacles instead of antennas. Elara waited, the hum of the engines a low growl in her ears. The Krell weren't after the isotopes. They wanted to silence Earth's last outpost, prove the council right. "We adapt or we die." Harlan, plot a skim, shallow dive, shields modulated to pulse. Mira, prep the suits for EVA if we snag a sample. The ship shuddered as they veered, engines whining in protest. Alarms blared, red lights pulsing like a heartbeat. Elara braced as the nebulous tendrils clawed at the hull, colors bleeding across the viewscreen in hypnotic waves. Harlan's plan held for the first minute, the ship threading a narrow channel where the plasma thinned. "Got a hit, cluster at bearing 240. Myra's voice cut through the tension. "But the radiation spiking. Suits won't hold more than 10 minutes out there." Elara unstrapped, pulling on her helmet. "Then we make it count." Grit laced her words, the camaraderie unspoken but ironclad. They weren't just crew, they were Earth's echo refusing to fade. The airlock cycled with a hiss, and Elara floated into the void, tethered to the Aurora. The nebula enveloped her, a silent storm of ionized gas that tugged at her suit like invisible hands. Harlan's voice crackled in her ear, "Pulse incoming, Krell's closing. You've got 3 minutes." She jetted toward the glittering specks, her gloved hand closing around the first isotope shard. It pulsed warm against her palm, a fragile victory. Myra's readings confirmed it, pure, enough to buy them weeks. But as she turned, a rift tore open nearby, a maw of raw energy spewing debris. The tether snapped taut, yanking her toward it. "Pull back." Harlan yelled, thrusters firing from the ship. Elara kicked hard, the rift's pull like a vacuum on her soul. One shard slipped free, tumbling into the abyss, a small loss but it stung. She hauled herself in, slamming the airlock shut as the Aurora peeled away. Back on the bridge, gasping, Elara handed the sample to Mira. "We got enough?" The scientist nodded, eyes wide. "Barely. But the Krell, they're adapting their fire patterns. Next time they won't miss. Ilara stared at the receding nebula, its glow fading like a false dawn. The silence from Earth felt heavier now, a warning etched in the stars. They had ingenuity, sure, but the cost was mounting, shields frayed, crew weary, and the Council's indifference a shadow growing longer. One more run, she thought, and we'd better make it the last. Captain Elena Reyes gripped the armrest of her command chair, the hum of the Odysseus engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with static-laced feeds from the outer sensors, painting the void in jagged blues and blacks. Her crew, 3 souls in this makeshift exile, huddled around the central console, their faces etched with the strain of weeks in hiding. "Any sign of pursuit?" she asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. Marcus Hale, the wiry engineer with a perpetual grease smear on his cheek, shook his head without looking up from his diagnostics. "Nothing on the scopes, Cap. But that vote on Epsilon Station, it's got the whole quadrant buzzing. If the Xerath picked up our transmission, they're not the type to let a no slide." He tapped a panel, coaxing a holographic map to life. Red blips dotted the edges, patrol routes of the alien enforcers, closing like a noose. Lieutenant Kira Voss, the sharp-tongued navigator whose optimism had frayed into quiet determination, leaned in. "We rerouted through the nebula, bought us time. But fuel's down to 30%. One more jump and we're drifting." Her fingers danced over the controls, plotting an evasive vector that snaked through asteroid fields. Elena nodded, her mind racing. The Council's vote had been a farce, humanity's plea for alliance dismissed as primitive posturing. Earth's silence afterward wasn't surrender, it was a calculated void, a warning that the old ways of begging for scraps were over. But out here it felt like a scream swallowed by space. Their mission: seed hidden outposts, rally fringe worlds quietly. No grand speeches, just grit and gears. A proximity alert shattered the calm. The console wailed, lights flashing crimson. Marcus cursed under his breath. "Incoming. Xerath interceptor, bearing 047, closing fast." Elena's pulse spiked. The plan had been simple. Slip past the patrols, dock with the neutral traders on Rigel 9 for resupply. But the nebula's interference had backfired, masking their approach but also scrambling their own NAV data. They'd veered too close to a Xerath sweep. "Evade," she barked. Kira's hands blurred across the board, the ship lurching as thrusters fired in a desperate spiral. The Odyssey groaned, inertial dampeners straining against the G-forces. On screen, the interceptor materialized, a sleek, predatory wedge of iridescent alloy, its weapons pods glowing with charged plasma. A hail pinged through, "Human vessel, stand down. By Council decree your withdrawal is unauthorized. Prepare for boarding." Marcus slammed a fist on the console. "Like hell. Cap, I can rig the auxiliary drive for a burst, get us to the traders, but it'll fry the coils. No more jumps after that." Elena waited, the cost sharp in her chest. The Odyssey was their lifeline, patched together from scavenged parts after the vote's fallout. Lose the drive, and they were grounded birds in a storm. But surrender meant Earth's silence broken, the warning nullified. "Do it," she said. "Kira, keep us dancing. Buy him time." The ship bucked as the interceptor fired a warning shot, a lance of energy grazing their shields. Sparks erupted from a nearby panel, acrid smoke curling into the air. Kira whooped despite the chaos, her voice cutting through the alarms. "Got a slingshot off that rock cluster, hang on." Marcus dove under the console, tools flashing as he bypassed safeties. Wires sparked in his hands, the engine's whine building to a fever pitch. Elena strapped in tighter, her eyes locked on the pursuing ship. It was gaining, relentless, a symbol of the Council's iron grip. The burst hit like a thunderclap. The Odyssey surged forward, stars streaking into lines as they punched through the asteroid veil. The interceptor veered, caught off guard, its shot going wide. Rigel 9 loomed ahead, a dusty orb ringed by salvage yards and shadowy docks. They broke atmosphere in a plume of retrofire, the hull shuddering as gravity clawed them down. Kira guided them to a concealed berth, away from the main traffic. As the ramp lowered, Elena caught her breath, the scent of alien fuels and rust hitting her like a wave. "Coils are toast," Marcus reported, wiping sweat from his brow. We're stuck till we scrounge parts. And the Zareth? They'll sniff us out eventually. Kira unstrapped, her eyes scanning the horizon. Traders here owe us from old runs. We can barter, lay low. But Cap, that silence back home. You think they're holding? Elena stepped onto the ramp, the alien wind whipping her uniform. In the distance, freighters hummed, oblivious to the storm brewing. The vote's echo lingered, a warning not just to the stars but to themselves. They are, she said, more to convince herself. We make sure of it. But as shadows lengthened over the yard, a faint comms chatter drifted in, Zareth frequencies probing. The hunt was on and their borrowed time was ticking down. Elena gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening as the ship's alarms blared a staccato rhythm through the dim bridge. The view screen flickered with static, revealing glimpses of the nebula's swirling chaos, a graveyard of ionized gas that clawed at their hull like invisible talons. Jax hunched over the auxiliary panel, his fingers dancing across the controls with the frantic precision of a man defusing his own heartbeat. We've got maybe 20 minutes before the core overloads, Jax muttered, his voice steady but laced with that wry edge he clung to like a shield. This nebula's frying our shields faster than a bad batch of synth coffee. Any bright ideas, Captain, or are we just gonna admire the pretty colors? Elena shot him a glance, her dark eyes sharp under the red emergency lighting. She wasn't one for panic. Years captaining fringe runs had etched caution into her bones, but today it felt like brittle armor. The vote back on the council station. Earth's deliberate silence amid the alien squabble over the Orion Arms mining rights had stranded them here, escorts pulled to enforce the fragile truce. Now with the drive failing and no backup, that silence echoed like a death knell. Divert power from life support, she said, straightening up. Buy us time to reroute the plasma vents. We've jury-rigged worse. Jax nodded, but his brow furrowed as he punched in the commands. The hum of the engines dipped, air recyclers whining in protest. For a moment the alarms quieted, and the ship shuddered forward through the nebula's heart. Elena allowed herself a breath, tasting the faint metallic tang of recycled oxygen. Then the deck lurched. A secondary alert pierced the comm, hull breach in engineering. Jax swore under his breath, bolting from his station. That's no nebula spark. Something's hitting us, deliberate. Elena followed, her boots pounding the corridor grates. The ship, the Endeavor, was a relic of human stubbornness, tough, adaptable, but no match for whatever prowled these clouds. As they reached the engineering bay, sparks flew from a gash in the bulkhead, venting atmosphere in icy plumes. Through the tear, Elena glimpsed it, a sleek shadow, alien contours slicing the gas like a predator's fin. Scavengers, Jax growled, sealing the breach with a hasty weld. Heard rumors after the vote, fringe fleets picking off the sideline. Earth's quiet stance made us look weak. The shadow banked, firing a probing shot that rattled the frame. Elena's mind raced. Their initial plan, skirt the nebula's edge and signal for pickup, had crumbled when the drive glitched. Now, cornered, she scanned the readouts. The alien craft was smaller, faster, but their scans showed jury-rigged weapons, likely salvaged from the very disputes the Council ignored. Arm the countermeasures, she ordered, grabbing a toolkit. We're not running. We turned this trap into their grave. Jax paused, toolkit in hand, his usual wit fading into grim resolve. You sure? One wrong move and we're space dust. Earth's silence won't mourn us. It already has, Elena replied, her voice low as she patched into the core. But we make noise now. They worked in tandem, sweat beading under the flickering lights. Elena recalibrated the vent arrays, channeling excess plasma into a makeshift flare. Jax synced it with a point defense grid, turning the ship's exhaust into a blazing decoy. The alien ship dove again, weapons charging. Fire on my mark, Elena said, her finger hovering over the release. The shadow closed, hungry. Jax's hands trembled slightly, not fear but the weight of it all. Earth's vote had been a gambit for peace, a human play at restraint amid the stars' endless wars. But restraint had costs, and here they were paying in full. Mark? Elena barked. The flare erupted, a sunburst in the nebula's gloom. The alien craft veered, sensors blinded, but not before a wild shot grazed their wing. Alarms wailed anew, structural integrity at 60%. The shadow retreated into the clouds, damaged but alive, a promise of return. Elena slumped against the console, the adrenaline ebbing like a receding tide. Jax wiped his brow, managing a half-smile. Clever. But they've got friends out there. And our core's limping. She nodded, staring at the scarred hull. The nebula's glow filtered through the vents, casting long shadows. Earth's silence had warned the galaxy of human patience, but patience broke. And when it did, the stars would listen. As the Endeavor limped onward, a faint signal pinged from the comms. A Council distress beacon, delayed but incoming. Help perhaps. Or just another layer of the vote's fallout. Either way they pressed on, the cost etched into every groaning plate. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening as the ship's alarms blared in staccato bursts. The nebulous tendrils clawed at the hull, their ionized gases sparking against the shields like frantic lightning. Beside her, Jax, the wiry engineer with his perpetual grease-streaked brow, muttered curses under his breath, fingers flying over the auxiliary panel. Shields at 40%, he said, voice steady despite the sweat beading on his forehead. If we push the engines any harder, we'll fry the core. Across the bridge, Lyra, the avian diplomat from the fringe worlds, paced with clipped steps, her feathers ruffled in agitation. She'd been the one to argue for this detour, insisting the nebula held a cache of uncharted minerals that could buy Earth's silence some leverage. Now, with the Council's vote echoing in their comms logs, that silence felt like a noose tightening. The Galactic Concord had dismissed humanity's plea for aid against the Vorath incursions, labeling Earth a provocative outlier. And here they were, 3 humans and 1 reluctant ally, scavenging in the dark to prove them wrong. Options? Ilara asked, her tone clipped, eyes fixed on the viewport where the nebula swirled in angry purples and blues. She was the brave one, the captain who charged into voids others avoided, but even she felt the weight of it now. The knowledge that failure meant no reinforcements, no second chance for the colonies. Jax glanced up, his cautious nature shining through in the hesitation before he spoke. We could vent plasma to clear a path, but it'd leave us blind for minutes. Or reroute power from life support, by time but risk blackouts. He wiped his hands on his jumpsuit, leaving fresh streaks. Your call, Cap. Lyra stopped pacing, her sharp beak clicking in thought. The Vorath signal is closing. They're drawn to the interference like moths. If we don't break free. She trailed off, but the implication hung heavy. Capture meant interrogation and Earth's secrets spilled. Ilara nodded, mind racing through the schematics Jax had drilled into her during the long hauls. The early plan to slip through the nebula's edge had backfired spectacularly when a gas pocket destabilized their trajectory, flinging them deeper into the heart. Now, with resources dwindling, oxygen recyclers straining, fuel reserves at critical, the stakes clawed higher. One wrong move, and the Endeavor became another ghost ship, a warning to any who dared defy the Council's indifference. Jax prepped the plasma vent, Ilara decided, her voice cutting through the din. Lyra monitored the Vorath signatures. If they get within firing range, we adapt. She straightened, channeling the grit that had kept her crew alive through worse. No speeches, just action, humanity's way, or so the old stories went. As Jax initiated the sequence, the ship shuddered, a low groan vibrating through the deck plates. The viewport filled with a brilliant flare, plasma ejecting in a controlled burst that carved a fleeting tunnel through the haze. For a heartbeat, clarity reigned. Stars winked into view, the nebulous chaos parting like a curtain. Ilara's pulse quickened. They were almost through. Then the alarm spiked anew. Vorath frigate, dead astern. Lyra squawked, her wings half unfurling in alarm. The alien vessel emerged from the nebula's fringe, its jagged hull slicing the gases, weapons ports glowing with charged energy. Jax slammed a fist on the console. Shields dropping fast, they're targeting the vents. Ilara spun to the helm, hands steady on the controls. No time for doubt. She banked hard, the Endeavor twisting through the narrowing gap, inertia pressing them into their seats. The frigate's first shot grazed the aft, a jolt that rattled loose panels and sparked warning lights. Oxygen levels flickered, down to 72%. The cost was immediate, tangible. Every breath now carried the edge of scarcity. Keep it together, Elara urged, more to herself than the others. Jax rerouted what power he could, his witty quips silenced by focus. Lyra fed coordinates, her diplomatic poise cracking into raw urgency. They weren't out yet, but in that shared strain, a fragile camaraderie burned brighter, the kind that turned warnings into weapons. The tunnel widened ahead, promising escape, but the Vorith closed the distance, their pursuit a relentless shadow. Elara pushed the engines to their limit, the ship protesting with a whine that echoed her own resolve. One more burst, one clever dodge, and perhaps Earth's silence could roar back to life. Captain Elara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the Aurora's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with sensor data, painting the void in stark blues and reds, Krillian scout ships closing in from 3 vectors, their sleek forms cutting through the asteroid field like predators in tall grass. Beside her, Jax Harlan, the engineer with his perpetual grease-streaked face and quick grin, tapped furiously at his console. They're jamming our comms, Cap. But I've got a workaround, rerouting through the debris echoes. She nodded, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Do it. We need to warn the others. The Aurora was one of the last human vessels still operational in the Outer Rim, a repurposed freighter turned guerrilla fighter after the Council's vote. That silence from Earth wasn't surrender, it was a signal, a calculated void that had the galaxy scrambling. But now, with the Krillians, those tentacled bureaucrats who'd swayed the vote against humanity, hunting them down, the plan felt like it was fraying at the edges. Lieutenant Mira Chen, ever the cautious tactician, leaned over Jax's shoulder, her dark eyes narrowing at the readouts. 3 against 1. We can't outgun them, but the asteroids could work for us. Slingshot maneuver? Her fingers traced a path on the holographic map, precise and unyielding, a habit from her academy days that had saved their skins more than once. Elara considered it, the weight of command pressing like the artificial gravity. The Council's embargo had stranded them, cut off supplies and allies, but human grit had turned scrap into shields, ingenuity into improvised weapons. Yet the cost was mounting, crewmates lost in skirmishes, morale cracking under the isolation. Agreed. Jax, boost the thrusters. Mira, plot the course. We're not running, we're drawing them in. The ship lurched as Jax fired the engines, weaving through the tumbling rocks with a precision that bordered on artistry. A Krillian beam lanced out, grazing the hull and sending sparks dancing across the bridge. Elara braced, tasting the metallic tang of fear, but her voice cut through the alarms. Hold steady. They've got numbers, but we know this field like the back of our hands. Myra's plan backfired almost immediately. The lead scout anticipated their arc, deploying drones that swarmed like angry hornets, forcing the Aurora to veer sharply. Alarms blared, hull breach in engineering. Jax cursed, bolting from his station. On it. Seal that section. He dashed out, toolkit clanging, leaving Elara and Mira to improvise. Options. Elara snapped, her mind racing through contingencies. The view screen showed the Krillians tightening their net, their transmissions a garbled mix of demands and threats, surrender for interrogation on the vote's fallout. Earth's silence had unnerved them, whispers of human superweapons rippling through the stars. If only they knew the truth, it was desperation, a forge for adaptation. Myra's hands flew over the controls, her cautious nature yielding to necessity. We vent the auxiliary tanks, create a debris cloud to blind them. Then flip and hit their flank with the railgun. It was risky. The railgun was jury-rigged for mining lasers, prone to overheating. But it was all they had. Do it. Elara punched the command, and the ship shuddered as pressurized gas erupted into space, blooming into a shimmering fog that swallowed the sensors. The Aurora spun, thrusters flaring in a ballet of fire and shadow. Mira fired, the railgun's slug tearing through the haze and crumpling a Krillian wing. Explosions lit the void, debris pinging off the hull like hail. But triumph was short-lived. The remaining scouts adapted, their shields modulating against the improvised barrage. One broke through, boarding pods launching toward the Aurora. Elara's heart pounded. Intruders incoming. Arm the corridors. Mira, get to the armory, cover Jax if he's still down there. As Mira sprinted off, Elara activated the internal defenses, her resolve hardening. The Council's vote had painted humans as primitives, But here in the crush of survival they proved otherwise, clever, unyielding, bound by trust forged in silence. The first pod breached with a hiss, and Elara drew her sidearm, the bridge lights flickering like a storm about to break. Whatever came next, they'd face it together, the warning of Earth's quiet echoing in every shot fired. Captain Elara Voss gripped the console edge as the Aurora's hull shuddered under another barrage. Alarms blared in the dim bridge, red lights casting jagged shadows across the faces of her crew. Beside her, Dr. Cale Thorne, the xenobiologist who'd argued for this desperate gambit, wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers trembling over the interface. "The signal's modulating," he muttered, voice steady despite the chaos. "If we can just align the frequencies." A explosion rocked the ship, cutting him off. Sparks flew from a nearby panel, and Lieutenant Mira Reyes, ever the quick-handed pilot, yanked the yoke hard. "Incoming from the Vexery fleet. They're closing the net. We need to jump now or we're scrap." Elara's jaw tightened. Brave to a fault, she'd led them this far on grid alone, but the plan, the one born from Earth's enforced silence after the Council's damning vote, teetered on collapse. That vote had branded humanity as reckless warmongers, justifying the Vexery blockade and the silence that followed. No transmissions, no aid, just Earth's quiet withdrawal as a stark warning to the galaxy. But silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy, a veil for operations like this one, smuggling proof of Vexery atrocities to neutral worlds. "Not yet," Elara said, her voice cutting through the din like a blade. She was the anchor, cautious in counsel but unyielding in command, her decisions forged in the fires of past losses. "Cale, status on the artifact?" He glanced up, eyes wide behind his visor. "It's resonating but the interference is too strong. One more hit and it'll overload." The artifact, a salvaged Vexery relic pulsing with forbidden data, evidence of their genocidal campaigns, hummed faintly in the adjacent lab, its glow seeping through the bulkhead like ethereal blood. Mira swore under her breath, her witty edge dulled by fatigue. "Captain, with respect, your clever adaptation is getting us killed. We've dodged 3 patrols already, the fleet's got our vector locked." Elara met her gaze, seeing the flicker of doubt. Mira had been the first to volunteer, her piloting skills a lifeline, but even she had limits. "Trust the play, Reyes. Earth's silence bought us time but this data breaks it, proves the Vexery rigged the vote. If we transmit now, the Council fractures." Another shudder, fiercer this time. The lights flickered, plunging the bridge into strobe-lit panic. Cale slammed a fist on the console. "Alignment failing. The relics destabilizing, evac protocols." Elara barked, but she didn't move toward the escape pods. Instead she hauled Cale to his feet, her grip iron. "Reyes, plot an evasive spiral toward the nebula. Buy us 30 seconds. Myra's hands flew across the controls, the ship groaning as it banked sharply. "On it. But if we don't jump, we're nebula fodder." Through the viewport, the Vexery cruisers loomed, their sleek forms slicing through the void like predators. Elara's mind raced, human ingenuity at its rawest, turning desperation into defiance. She'd seen colonies razed, friends lost to the Council's indifference, but this was redemption or oblivion. Cale patched into the relic's core, his cautious nature yielding to urgency. "Rerouting power from life support. It's risky, do it." Elara's order was final, her breath steady as the ship dove into the nebula's swirling gases. Colors bloomed outside, a chaotic veil that might just hide them. The transmission initiated with a whine, data streaming toward the nearest neutral relay. But the Vexery fired again, a direct hit shearing off a nacelle. Alarm screamed hull breach. Mira fought the controls, the Aurora spinning wildly. "Signals away," Cale gasped, slumping as systems faltered. "But they're boarding," Elara drew her sidearm, rallying her small crew. The cost was here, tangible. A ship dying, lives on the line. Yet in that moment, as Vexery drones breached the airlock, she felt the weight of Earth's warning lift. The galaxy would hear the truth, earned through blood and silence broken. Captain Elara Voss gripped the console, her knuckles white against the humming interface. The bridge of the Aurora felt smaller now, the recycled air thick with the scent of ozone from the overtaxed engines. Outside the viewport, the nebula swirled in lazy violets and indigos, a deceptive comm masking the debris field they just navigated. Her team, Dr. Kai Ren, the wiry engineer whose quick fingers had jury-rigged half the ship's systems, and Lyra, the tentative Krellian ally whose scales still shimmered with unease, huddled nearby, their faces lit by the glow of tactical displays. "We've got incoming," Kai muttered, his voice steady despite the sweat beading on his brow. He tapped a sequence into his datapad, pulling up the sensor readouts. The Vexery fleet, those sleek predators who'd enforced the Council's edict, was closing in. Earth's silence after the vote, that damning isolation decree branding humanity as a quarantine risk, had been no surrender. It was a calculated void that let them slip the noose and strike back. But now, with the Aurora carrying the proof of Vexery corruption, the noose tightened. Lyra's compound eyes flicked toward Alara. "The transmission window opens in 3 minutes. If we don't align perfectly." She trailed off, her mandibles clicking softly. The Krellian had risked everything defecting, her people's fragile alliance with the Council fracturing under the weight of human grit. Alara nodded, forcing a grim smile. "Then we make it count." "Kai, status on the decoy drones." "Deployed and singing," he replied, his wit cutting through the tension like a laser. The drones, cobbled from salvaged parts and a dash of human improvisation, mimicked the Aurora's signature, drawing the Vexery scouts away like moths to a flame. It wasn't flawless tech, far from the polished alien wonders, but it worked because it had to. Alara watched the holograph as the dots converged, the enemy ships veering off course into the nebula's denser clouds. The ship shuddered, a near miss from a probing scan. Alara's heart pounded, but she kept her voice level. "Hold steady. Lyra, sync the beacon." The Krellian leaned over the comms array, her claws dancing across the controls. The beacon was their ace, a burst of encrypted data exposing the Vexery's vote rigging, the bribes that had silenced Earth. Not just words but irrefutable logs pulled from the Council's own archives, smuggled out by human hackers who'd turned digital silence into a weapon. Alarms blared as the Vexery lead ship broke through the decoy veil, its weapons hot and locking on. "Evasive." Alara barked, yanking the yoke. The Aurora banked hard, inertial dampeners whining in protest. Kai braced against the bulkhead, rerouting power from life support to shields in a move that left the air growing stale. 2 minutes to window, he called, his caution yielding to the fire in his eyes. Lyra's voice rose urgent. "They're hailing, demanding surrender." Alara glanced at her, seeing the doubt flicker in those alien eyes. "Ignore it. We've come too far to fold now." She thought of the billions back on Earth, grounded by the vote, their ingenuity bottled up like a storm waiting to break. This transmission would shatter that, turning silence into a roar across the galaxy. The Vexery fired, a glancing plasma bolt that scorched the hull. Sparks flew from a panel and Kai dove to seal it, cursing under his breath. Alara pushed the engines harder, the ship groaning as it threaded the nebula's edge. 1 minute. The viewport filled with the enemy's silhouette, closing fast. Lyra initiated the burst, the comms lighting up like a supernova. Data streamed out, proof of manipulation, calls for a revote, humanity's unyielding case woven into every byte. Impact rocked them, systems flickering. Kai shouted, "Shields at 20%. Alara spun the ship into a tight spiral, buying seconds. The transmission completed with a soft chime, echoing through the bridge. Lyra slumped back, exhaling. "It's out. The Council will hear it." But the Vexery weren't done. Their boarding pods launched, slamming into the Aurora's side. Alara sealed the bridge, her mind racing. "Kai, overload the pod bays, make it look like a reactor breach." He nodded, fingers flying, turning the enemy's aggression against them. Explosions bloomed outside, pods detonating in chain reactions that lit the nebula like fireworks. Silence fell as the Vexery retreated, their formation breaking. Alara released the yoke, slumping into her chair. The cost was clear. The Aurora limped, hull breached, crew down to essentials. Earth remained isolated for now, the vote's shadow lingering, but the galaxy knew. Whispers would spread, human silence wasn't weakness but a warning sharp as a blade. Lyra placed a claw on Alara's shoulder. "You're kind, you don't break easy." Alara met her gaze, the camaraderie forged in fire. "Neither do yours now." Outside, the nebula parted, stars emerging like promises. The fight wasn't over, but the tide had turned, earned through sweat and clever defiance.